Talk to the Paw presents the Canine Ladder of Aggression. Hi, it's Claire here from Talk to the Paw, and welcome to our video on the Canine Ladder of Aggression. Now, aggression is probably the wrong word for this, although the ladder does end up in biting. But what we're looking at here is a series of body language signals that our dogs go through when they're faced with something they find threatening. The purpose of the body language signals is for them to increase distance between them and the thing that they're worried about. Now, this might be something really frightening or just something that they're wary of. We're going to have a look at each body language signal in detail and pull it apart so we can see what might be happening with your dog. Dogs communicate using body language. They don't know any other way because they're not verbal and they don't come with understanding built in. So we're going to start by looking at what we would term the green signals. The green signals are what would be commonly known as the flight response. If you've watched any David Attenborough programs, you'll have heard about this. Flight is designed to get yourself as far away as possible, conserve energy and live to see another day. So let's have a look at what you might see when your dog starts to use its flight response. We start off with yawning, blinking and nose licking. Very, very subtle signals. Let's have a look at that in action. This is Molly, our toy poodle, with Dave brushing her. Notice the number of lip licks she does. She's also trying to move away. Let's have a look in slow motion. Lip lick 1. Lip lick 2. And 3. And again. This is our Podenco Scooby. Notice him yawning when the other dog comes past. And he starts to look a little bit more uncomfortable the more it happens. You can see him slow blinking, which is then followed by a lip lick. Closely followed by yawning and lip licking or nose licking is turning the dog's head away. We most commonly see this when the dog is asked to do something it doesn't want to do. Often we see it in training. We ask the dog to do something, it doesn't do it, so we put a treat in its face and it turns its head away. How many times do you think your dog does this a day? It'd be really interesting for you to count. Let's have a look at that head turn in action. Did you catch it? Let's watch it in slow motion. So once the head has turned, the body will often follow suit. A turned body can be accompanied by a paw raise. Often we see this in puppies and we think it's cute. We think they're giving a paw. But actually, they're starting to try and increase distance. The dog is usually sitting in this position, and so it's really common to look cute. Let's have a look at paw raises and body turns in action. Here's Scooby giving a paw raise after he's been asked to sit. This is because the other dogs are really close by. He doesn't feel comfortable. The final part of the green responses is walking away. This is our final flight response, really. The dog is actually moving away from what it's worried about. We see this time and time again in situations where there are children around dogs. The children approach the dog gets up and walks away, the children follow the dog. the dog gets up and walks away, the children follow the dog, and so on until the dog ends up not being able to move away anymore. Another common situation where this occurs is dogs who don't like having their harness or lead put on. They'll move away. They'll move away from the thing that they don't like. Can you recognise any times when your dog moves away from something that it doesn't like? Here's Molly again, moving away from Gilly. He's far too big. Let's look in slow motion. She sees him coming, steps back, moves away. See that tongue flick as well. He turns round and goes back. And she moves away in another direction. She does a little paw raise before she moves away this time. Let's have a look at the amber sections. These are strange body language signals because they don't fit into the flight response necessarily. There are some other Fs that come into play here. Fiddle, freeze and faint. So the first thing we might see is the dog starting to creep with its body. The ears generally go back at this point. We often see this when the dog has a resource that it wants to keep hold of. It will pick up the resource and it will start to move away very, very slowly. Let's have a look at that in action. Watch Scooby's ears go back before he finally moves away. Now we start to see a dog who we recognise as scared. A dog that's standing crouched with its tail tucked under. Most of us would see that as a scared dog, but look how far up the ladder of aggression this is. If we look at this in slow motion, we can see the intensity of the behaviour increase as the person steps towards the dog. Just there. The dog may just lie down with its leg up in the air. Again, this is often misread as a dog wanting its belly tickled. If we're seeing other signs with this, such as a turned head, then the dog is not asking to have its belly tickled. It's a distance increasing behaviour. This can be deemed a fiddle response or a fiddle about response. The dog doesn't want to do something and they start fiddling about. Dogs often roll over or start wagging their tails and lowering their bodies. Again, it looks very cute, but it really is a distance increasing behaviour. Our dogs do this when it's time to go in the bath. When does your dog do this? Let's have a look at that fiddle about. Here's Poppy with Gilly exposing her belly. Notice after she's done it, she actually moves away. The last of the Fs in this section is faint. We don't see this very often in dogs. It's literally when the dog goes so still, it looks to the predator like it's dead. We see this in a lot of other species, but not so much in our dogs. So we've started to see the escalation from green to amber body language. But at this point, the dog is really asking for distance in ways that aren't threatening or aggressive. We call this whispering. The dog is really asking nicely, please go away from me. We're going to start looking now at what happens when you whisper and you can't be heard. You have to start shouting. So in this section, we're going to look at what does a dog do when it has to start shouting. Remember, when it's shouting, it's because it's been whispering and it hasn't been heard. These would be commonly known as your fight responses. Fight responses start with a stiffening and a stare. Let's have a look at that in action. Scooby doesn't want the other dogs to have his toy. The next thing that the dog will do is move into growling. Growling is a worrying behaviour as far as people are concerned, and this is usually when we start to take notice. Look how far up the ladder of aggression growling is. Look how many warning signals a dog has given before it moves into this place. Let's have a look at growling in action. In slow motion we can see some of those other signals as well. Eyes wide, ears flat back, dog in a bit of a freeze. So if a growl is not listened to, or even worse, it's punished by a person, or the growl hasn't moved something threatening away, which may even be another dog, the only option available to you next is snapping. We call it an air snap, and it's when you hear the teeth of the dog snap in the air but not make any contact with anything. Air snaps are a warning. If you push me any further, I'm going to have to bite you. Let's have a look at snapping in action. So the final behaviour on the ladder of aggression is a bite. Those of us who work with aggression cases know that a bite is not just a bite. There are levels of bite, but we're going to put this right at the top of the tree. This is the option the dog takes when all the other options are not available to it. This is the bit when people get on the phone to seek help. This may even be yourself. Dog's bitten and you don't understand why that's happened. So biting very rarely comes out of the blue. This is what happens. The dog gives its green signals. It starts whispering, but it's not heard. So these rungs of the ladder become extinct. The dog moves away or lies down with its leg up, and it's still not listened to. So these rungs of the ladder become extinct. So the only option available to the dog is to move to growling. If the growling is punished or not listened to, then that's going to become extinct as well. So if we look at what we have available to the dog to increase distance from something it finds threatening, we really only have snapping and biting. Let's think of some situations where we might see this happen. It's very common in dogs who don't like other dogs. As soon as they see another dog, they move to snapping and biting. And it's more common on lead than it is off lead. This could be your dog. All those other body language signals have been ignored by other dogs, and so they have to move to this to get a dog to move away. It's also very common in dogs who are touched by people when they don't like it. So they give some warning signals and the person touches the dog anyway. Or the dog is crowded by people and touched without permission, and they have to move to snapping in order to get the person to move away. This is really common in puppies with well-meaning people who think they know dogs. This could also be your dog. So throughout your behaviour programme, what we're going to do is start you listening to your dog. We're going to start saying to the dog that you're going to get listened to when you do some of these things. That you don't have to move to biting and snapping in order to get your point across. That we're going to put trust back in. So a conversation starts to happen and the dogs learn that they can move people away by doing some different body language signals. So we appreciate how hard it is to see these things. They happen in an instant. The dogs are so quick to give these signals that as people it can be really hard to see them. So that's our job, to teach you and show you when these are occurring with your dog. But for the rest of the day, have an observation of your dog and see if you can see any of these things happening. And let us know how you get on.